Ever feel like ChatGPT is just too good to be true? Almost like magic.
Yeah, it can be pretty mind-blowing.
Well, today we're going behind the scenes, to uncover these surprisingly human-like ways these large language models,
LLMs.
LLMs, right, are actually built.
It's easy to think of AI as this mysterious black box, but
Sure.
getting a glimpse into how they learn can really change how we use them.
We're diving deep today into a talk by Andrej Karpathy,
Oh yeah, I've seen that one.
former head of AI at Tesla,
Impressive.
who breaks down the whole process, right?
Mm-hmm.
He reveals the reasons behind those moments when LLMs make those head-scratching mistakes
Yeah, this can be frustrating.
and what makes them so brilliant in other areas.
It's fascinating because we're seeing this huge shift in how we interact with technology.
Absolutely.
And understanding the nuts and bolts of LLMs can help us navigate this new world.
So how do these things learn? Karpathy calls the first stage pre-training.
Right.
And it's basically like an AI going on a massive internet binge.
Right. That's a great way to put it. Imagine an LLM trying to download almost the entire internet.
Wow.
Absorbing information from countless websites and articles, it breaks down all this text into smaller units called tokens,
Okay.
kind of like digital building blocks of language.
So it's like teaching the AI the alphabet so it can eventually write a novel.
Exactly. It needs to learn the basic units of language before it can do anything more complex.
But here's the thing. It's not a perfect copy. Karpathy compares it to a blurry
Right.
remix version of the web. Does that explain why LLMs sometimes get things so hilariously wrong?
Exactly. Trying to cram all that information into a model is like squeezing an entire library into a single book.
Okay.
You might get the main ideas, but some details are going to get lost or mixed up, leading to some interesting quirks.
And that leads to those hallucinations we've all seen where an LLM states something totally made up,
Yeah.
as if it were fact.
Like, it's trying too hard to sound smart.
It is a bit like that. You see, at their core, LLMs are essentially prediction machines. They're constantly guessing the next word in a sequence based on what they've seen in their training data.
Right.
So even though internally the model might sense some uncertainty, it hasn't figured out how to tell us, hey, I'm not so sure about this.
It's as if part of the LLM's brain is signaling, wait, I don't know this. But that signal hasn't been connected to its ability to express uncertainty in words.
That's a great way to visualize it. So it's not intentional deception. It's more like the LLM trying to fill in the blanks in the most plausible way possible,
Right.
even if it means making things up. Which brings up a big question. How do we make these LLMs more truthful?
Well, Karpathy talks about two main approaches.
Okay,
One is training LLMs to admit when they don't know the answer.
like, I don't know.
Yeah. Imagine teaching a student to say, I need to look that up, instead of just making up an answer on a test.
Makes sense. What about the second approach?
The second approach is to give LLMs access to tools. Think of it like giving them internet access,
Okay.
so they can double check facts. It's like giving an LLM access to a search engine or calculator right within the conversation.
So rather than relying solely on that jumbled internet copy in their memory,
Yeah,
they can go out and get the most up-to-date info.
precisely.
Clever.
Yeah.
So stage one is all about devouring info, making this base model a kind of rough draft of all that internet knowledge.
Right.
But it's not quite ready to be a helpful assistant just yet.
Not yet.
That's where stage two, post-training, comes in.
That's where we go from raw information to something that resembles how we communicate.
So we take that base model and show it how humans actually chat with each other.
Precisely. Human labelers step in to craft ideal responses to different prompts,
Oh, wow.
essentially teaching the LLM how to have a conversation.
So the LLM is learning to mimic human conversation,
Right.
shaping its personality based on those examples.
Exactly.
You're telling me the values of the company that built the LLM get reflected in how the assistant talks to us. That's pretty wild.
It is. We have to remember that even unintentionally, human values and biases can seep into these AI systems.
Right?
That's why being mindful of those values during development is so important.
So when we're using ChatGPT, we're essentially interacting with a digital version of those human labelers,
Right.
but with some interesting quirks because it's all filtered through that blurry copy of the internet we talked about.
Exactly.
No wonder things can get a bit unpredictable.
That's why understanding an LLM's limitations is so important. They aren't a perfect reflection of how we think.
Right.
They're complex systems with their own strengths and weaknesses.
And speaking of those quirks, let's go back to those hallucinations for a minute. We touched on why they happen, but I think we can dig a little deeper.
Sure. Remember, these LLMs are always trying to predict the next word in a sequence,
Yeah.
aiming for a smooth flow of language. But that prediction process isn't foolproof.
Right.
Sometimes it can go off the rails,
Uh-huh.
leading to those moments where it confidently states things that just aren't true.
It's almost like they're bluffing, but not in a malicious way.
It really is more about completing a pattern than intentionally deceiving anyone.
So what are researchers doing to fix this?
Well, we've already touched on some of them. Teaching LLMs to admit when they don't know something,
I don't know.
and giving them access to tools to fact-check themselves. But it's an ongoing challenge.
Right, it's like we're giving them the ability to say, hold on, let me double check that. But even with these safeguards,
Yeah.
we have to remember that LLMs aren't perfect. They're powerful tools, but we can't take everything they say at face value.
Absolutely. Critical thinking is key when you're interacting with an LLM.
This leads us to what Karpathy calls LLM psychology. It's all about figuring out how these AI brains think and where their thought processes differ from our own.
It's a fascinating area of research, and it can be a bit mind-bending at times.
Okay, I'm ready to get in my mind, Ben. What makes these AIs tick differently from us?
Well, for one thing, they have a limited amount of processing power for each token they generate. Think of it like their working memory having a limited capacity. They can't handle really complex calculations all at once.
So instead of tackling a huge problem all at once,
Yeah.
they break it down into smaller,
Right,
more manageable steps.
exactly. And another interesting quirk is that LLMs don't see individual letters the way we do.
Oh, sure.
They operate at the level of those tokens we talked about,
Right.
which can make tasks related to spelling or manipulating individual letters surprisingly difficult.
So even though they can write beautiful poetry,
Right.
they might struggle to spell a simple word correctly because of how they see language.
It really highlights that they're incredibly powerful in some areas,
Yeah.
but have these unexpected gaps in others. Karpathy calls it a Swiss cheese model of capabilities. There are these surprising holes in their knowledge and abilities, and we don't always know why.
It's like that example he shared,
Right.
where LLMs struggled with the question,
Yeah.
is 9.11 bigger than 9.9?
Yeah.
It seems so basic, but
Yeah.
it tripped them up because of how they process numbers as tokens.
Exactly.
It's a good reminder that even the most advanced AI systems can still behave in ways that are completely counterintuitive to us.
And that's why this field is so exciting. We're constantly learning new things about these systems,
Right.
and they're constantly evolving.
So we've covered pre-training, where the LLM absorbs information, and
Mhm.
post-training, where it learns to converse like us.
Right.
But the journey doesn't end there. There's a third stage, reinforcement learning, that takes things to a whole new level. What happens in this stage?
This is where things get really interesting. Think of it like giving a student practice problems. They already have the basic knowledge,
Okay.
and now they need to figure out how to apply it.
So it's less about just memorizing facts
Right.
and more about developing their own problem-solving strategies. They're graduating from students to master strategists. Give me the details.
In reinforcement learning, LLMs are given a problem and the correct answer, but they have to figure out the solution themselves. This is where we see some truly remarkable emergent behavior.
What kind of remarkable behavior?
Well, LLMs start to develop their own internal thinking processes, coming up with creative and sometimes even unexpected solutions. They're not just following instructions anymore. They're becoming independent thinkers.
It's like we're giving them the tools to learn how to learn.
Exactly. And that's a pretty big deal.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
From internet binging to conversational simulations to AI brains figuring things out on their own. And I have to ask, how far can this go? What does the future hold for LLMs?
That's a question that has a lot of people excited
Yeah.
and maybe a little bit nervous too. The possibilities seem almost limitless.
Well, we've already seen LLMs do things that seemed impossible just a few years ago.
Right.
And the pace of development is only getting faster.
Exactly. And one of the areas that Karpathy is particularly excited about is the emergence of multimodal LLMs.
Multimodal, what does that mean?
It means LLMs that can handle not just text, but other types of data too.
Okay,
Things like audio and images.
hold on. So we're talking about AI that can not only read and write,
Yeah,
but also listen, speak, and even see.
precisely. And that opens up a whole new world of possibilities.
I can already imagine AI systems that can understand and respond to our spoken commands, create realistic images from text descriptions, or even compose music.
It's amazing.
It's like we're on the verge of a whole new era of human-computer interaction.
Exactly. And it's not just about these systems becoming more versatile, it's also about them becoming more powerful.
Okay.
As they continue to learn and evolve,
Yeah.
they may develop problem-solving abilities that surpass our own in certain areas.
Wait, really? Like
Yeah.
how?
Well, remember how we were talking about LLMs developing their own unique thinking strategies?
Yeah, it's fascinating to think that they're not just mimicking us,
Right.
but coming up with their own ways of approaching problems.
Right. And Karpathy draws an interesting analogy to the famous Move 37 in the game of Go.
Refresh my memory on that.
It was a move made by the AI system AlphaGo that completely baffled even the most experienced Go players.
Oh, wow.
It was like AlphaGo saw something in the game that no human had ever seen before.
So you're saying LLMs could find solutions that are not only brilliant,
Yeah,
but completely alien to our way of understanding.
exactly. It's a possibility that's both exciting and a little bit unnerving.
Right.
We're essentially creating systems that have the potential to outthink us in certain domains.
Looks like we're opening Pandora's box of intelligence.
Right.
But instead of releasing chaos,
Right.
hopefully we can use it for good.
That's the key. If we understand how these systems learn and reason, we can guide their development in a positive direction. And that's why this deep dive is so important. It's about more than just understanding the technology. It's about understanding its implications.
And with that, I think we're ready for a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue exploring the future of LLMs and what it all means for us. We're back, and before the break, we were on the edge of our seats talking about LLMs potentially outsmarting us in some areas.
And it all comes down to this idea of reinforcement learning, where they move beyond simply mimicking human behavior.
Right. It's like they're graduating from being students who can parrot back information to becoming master strategists who can think for themselves.
And what's really remarkable is that they don't just get better at solving the specific problems we give them.
They develop this broader ability to learn and adapt, which opens up so many doors.
Exactly. They're figuring out how to learn, which is a huge leap forward.
So where could this lead? What are the potential applications of these super learners?
Well, imagine an LLM that can help scientists design new drugs by sifting through vast amounts of data and identifying promising compounds.
Or an LLM that can help engineers design more efficient energy systems.
Or even LLMs that can create personalized education plans tailored to each student's unique strengths and weaknesses.
It's like having a team of brilliant assistants working around the clock to solve some of the world's most pressing problems.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. As LLMs continue to evolve, we can expect to see even more amazing and transformative applications emerge.
It's both exciting and a little bit daunting, isn't it? To think that we're creating these systems that could potentially reshape our world in such profound ways.
It is, and that's why it's so important to have these conversations to explore both the potential benefits and the potential risks of this technology.
Right, because with great power comes great responsibility.
Absolutely. And speaking of potential risks, let's circle back to that issue of hallucinations.
It's like a persistent bug that even the smartest LLMs can't seem to shake.
And as we've discussed, it stems from the fact that they're fundamentally prediction machines.
Always trying to generate the most statistically likely response, even if that means bending the truth a little.
Or a lot sometimes.
Right. And while researchers are working on ways to mitigate these hallucinations, it's an ongoing challenge.
Especially as LLMs become more complex and their outputs become more difficult to scrutinize.
So even as these systems become more impressive in their abilities, we can't let our guard down.
We still need to approach their pronouncements with a healthy dose of skepticism.
It's like fact-checking anything you read online.
Exactly. Verify the information, consider alternative perspectives, and be aware of potential biases.
Because remember, LLMs are tools.
They can be incredibly powerful tools, but they're still just tools.
And like any tool, they can be used for good or for ill.
It's up to us to guide their development and ensure that they're used ethically and responsibly.
Now, earlier we talked about how giving LLMs access to external tools like search engines or code interpreters can enhance their capabilities.
And this idea of giving LLMs tools is a really exciting area of research.
It's like equipping them with a Swiss Army knife of resources to help them tackle even more complex tasks.
Exactly. Imagine an LLM that can not only write code, but also execute that code and see the results.
Or an LLM that can access real-time data from the internet to provide up-to-the-minute insights.
The possibilities are endless. And as LLMs become more adept at using these tools, we can expect to see even more groundbreaking applications emerge.
It's almost like we're giving them the keys to the kingdom of knowledge.
And it's up to us to ensure they use those keys wisely.
Now, before we wrap up our deep dive into the world of LLMs, There's one more fascinating aspect I want to explore.
I'm intrigued. What is it?
It's this question of LLM identity.
Ah, yes. The question of whether these AI systems have a sense of self.
It's a question that sparked a lot of debate and speculation.
And for good reason. If they can think for themselves, learn, and even develop their own personalities, it's natural to wonder if they might also have a sense of who they are.
Right. So what are the experts saying?
Well, Karpathy had interesting thoughts on this. He points out that people often ask LLMs questions like, what model are you? Or who built you?
Yeah, I've seen those prompts online. It's like people trying to get a glimpse behind the curtain to see if there's a person in there somewhere.
But Karpathy argues that these questions are fundamentally misguided.
Why is that?
Because, as we've discussed, LLMs aren't people, they don't have a persistent existence in the way that we do.
They're more like programs that are constantly being run and restarted, processing information and generating output.
Exactly. And each time they're run, they essentially start with a clean slate, building up a context window of conversation that's then discarded when the interaction ends.
So they don't have a continuous stream of consciousness or a sense of self that persists over time.
Right. They're essentially token processing machines following the statistical patterns they've learned from their training data.
So it doesn't really make sense to ask them about their identity or origins because those concepts don't apply to them in the same way they do to humans.
Precisely. And Karpathy highlights some interesting examples of how LLMs respond to these types of prompts.
Like what?
He mentions an older model called Falcon that, when asked who built you, would sometimes respond with OpenAI.
But Falcon wasn't actually built by OpenAI, right?
Right. And Karpathy's explanation for this is fascinating. He suggests that because OpenAI and its models are so prominent in the vast amount of text data that LLMs are trained on the model might simply be statistically associating the concept of helpful assistant with OpenAI.
So it's not that Falcon is consciously trying to lie or deceive. It's just that its statistical model of the world leads it to that response.
Exactly. It's a great example of how these systems can produce outputs that seem to suggest a deeper level of understanding or self-awareness, when in reality they're simply following statistical patterns.
It's like they're mimicking the language and behavior of self-aware beings without actually possessing that quality themselves.
And it highlights the importance of being cautious in interpreting LLM outputs. We can't assume that they have the same understanding of concepts like identity or consciousness that we do.
Right. We need to remember that they're fundamentally different kinds of entities, even if they can sometimes seem remarkably human-like in their interactions.
And that's a good reminder as we wrap up this part of our deep dive. LLMs are powerful tools that are rapidly changing the way we interact with information and technology.
But it's crucial to approach them with both wonder and a healthy dose of skepticism.
We need to understand their strengths and limitations, their unique ways of thinking, and the potential pitfalls of anthropomorphizing them.
And we need to be mindful of the ethical implications of using these systems, ensuring that they're developed and deployed in a way that benefits all of humanity.
It's a topic that deserves careful consideration.
Absolutely. So let's dive into that. After a quick break, we'll explore some resources and final thoughts on this fascinating topic. We're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into the world of LLMs.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? We've explored how these systems learn their unique thinking processes, and even touched on the philosophical questions they raise about intelligence and identity.
It really makes you think about the future and the role AI will play in our lives.
Absolutely. And as we've discussed, it's a future filled with both incredible potential and potential challenges. So, what are some key takeaways you hope our listeners will remember?
I think the biggest one for me is that LLMs are much more complex than they might appear on the surface.
They're not just glorified chatbots or search engines, they're sophisticated learning machines with their own unique strengths and weaknesses.
Right. And understanding those strengths and weaknesses is crucial if we want to use these systems effectively and responsibly.
We've talked a lot about hallucinations and how they can lead LLMs to make mistakes, sometimes even fabricating information.
It's a good reminder to always be critical of what you see and hear, even if it comes from an AI.
Exactly. Double check information, consider different perspectives, and remember that LLMs are tools, not oracles.
They can be incredibly powerful tools, but they're still just tools, and we need to be the ones guiding their use.
It all circles back to that idea of responsible development and deployment. We have a responsibility to ensure that LLMs are used for good, not for harm.
Okay, so for our listeners who are eager to learn more about this fascinating world of LLMs, where would you suggest they start?
Well, the talk by Andrej Karpathy that we've been discussing is a great starting point. He explains things in a way that's engaging and easy to understand.
It's definitely worth a listen.
And there are tons of other resources available online, including articles, tutorials, and even open source LLM projects.
Websites like Hugging Face are great hubs for all things LLMs.
You can find everything from pre-trained models to data sets to code examples. It's a great way to get hands-on experience with the technology.
So there's really something for everyone, whether you're just curious about LLMs or ready to dive into the technical details.
And that's what's so exciting about this field. There's so much to explore, and it's constantly evolving.
Before we wrap up, is there a final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Well, we've talked about LLMs as tools, but what if those tools start to develop their own goals and motivations?
That's a pretty profound question. It really gets to the heart of what it means to be intelligent and the relationship between humans and AI.
It's a question that researchers and ethicists are grappling with, and there are no easy answers.
It's something we all need to be thinking about as these systems become more advanced and integrated into our lives.
We need to be prepared for the possibility that AI might not always align with our goals and values.
So it's not just about developing smarter AI, it's about developing AI that's aligned with our vision for a better future.
Exactly. And that's a challenge that requires collaboration, thoughtful discussion, and a commitment to using this technology for the benefit of all.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of LLMs. Thanks for joining us. We hope you learned something new and are just as excited about the possibilities of LLMs as we are.